kindly introduce yourself, like I said, 30 seconds, and then we'll get to a discussion.
Dante Carroll, professionally been involved in business and civic matters for the last almost 30 years. However, the most important, significant, challenging, rewarding job has been to be husband and father to Lachelle, father to two children, Brandon and Cameron, and specifically Wyoming and his family, to talk about that experience of helping to raise that young man, Brandon, my wife, Lachelle.
I'm Jamar Law, Executive Director of the Jamar Law Foundation. Some of you had the privilege to come to my workshop today. Middle school educator, advocate for financial education in the community.
I am John Wright, co-owner of ABC Fitness Connection. I'm retired military. We've been in business for over 20 years, and we're raising two sons as well. One of my sons goes to Morgan, the other one at SU, and my wife, wherever she is, she should be on the way here.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Daniel Hudson. I'm a clinical psychologist, owner of Pathway Psychological Services. I am here because I'm a father who has a son by a mother that is, of course, not my wife right now. I have three beautiful girls, Danielle, Taylor, and Caitlin. My son Anthony, who's no longer with us from April 27th of last year. But I'm here to talk about my experiences that I had with co-raising him with his mother.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Green. I'm the co-founder of Marriage Built to Last, along with my wife. And we help couples grow stronger together and build for their future and have a vision where they're going with their marriage. And I have a blended family. I don't have any biological children with my current wife, but I have two from her previous marriage, and she had two from her previous marriage. So we are a blended family.
How you doing? I'm Jamie Tyler, founder of the Jamie Tyler Foundation, and also retired 25-year veteran in the DC Police Department. And I stand here today. I've been married just here 30 years, with my wife 33 years, and she had a daughter when wasn't easy, but she had a daughter when I met her, and we have two young kings together, and I'm here just to share my experience raising our daughter.
All right, well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that.
So everybody didn't hit on their family. So I got 4 boys and a girl. My wife and I became number one, so I'm a blended family. So I left, had to go to baseball game, my little one back there, so my daddy didn't call, so I had to come back and have to sit with the panel with gentlemen. So thank you for having me.
All right, outstanding, outstanding. And as you can see, we have a diverse group intentionally because of that. First of all, the first question, and I want to let Mr. Green answer this first, and we'll see who else may have a response. But first question is, what does the phrase "raising kings together" mean to you?
Well, when I think of raising kings, it's not just about parenting. That goes along with it, plus mentoring and role models. You know, like you said, it takes a village to raise a king. And when you think of all the people involved, it's shaping their character. And when you shape their character, you have to nurture their growth. You know how you nurture a relationship, or you nurture, your marriage or any type of relationship. You have to nurture your children also and shape them into be better men, so they can be confident, they can be dependable, they can be reliable, and be grounded, and I mean grounded in values and have purpose. That's what I think it is of raising kings.
All right, thank you. Anyone else on the panel have a response? Once, twice, we got so many questions, so if you don't, that's fine.
I'll say something real quick, which is that I thought about this question quite a bit, and one phrase that came to my mind was nobility to nobility, right? Raising a king, means is that it's being raised by a king, right? You're noble, and so we have to teach them how to be noble, right? It's about development, and for development, we have to be intentional in how we're doing that. Intentionality is very important. When you're a king, you are like the focal point. So as we as parents who are raising kings, they have to be our focus. And we're talking about mixed families here, and if our child is not the focus of of their development, right? If we're not focused on their development, then we're not going to raise up to be very good kings. If we cannot model them to be a king, then they're not going to be kings, right? You don't become a king just because you're born into a family. You're a king because you were developed into a king, and that takes time. That takes practice, and then eventually you'll get that title of king, and then you're able to walk in that title of being a king. So that's the important part about it.
Thank you, Skip. No one else, I'll go to the second question. All right, what is the biggest mistake that co-parents make that negatively affects boys? What is the biggest mistake that co-parents make that negatively affect boys? Mr. Carroll.
I think often a mistake that I know we've made, and I'm sure others have made, is the limited and narrow view of what it means to be a man. Toxic masculinity is one of the biggest mistakes that we make in raising our sons. I like to say that men in many ways are taught that you are like an 8-color box of crayons. There's limited space emotionally that you operate in. Women are like the 64 box of crayons, where you have all of these variants and gradients of how you can show up emotionally that is acceptable by society. And one of the things that we weren't intentional about, after we realized that the danger of going down the other way, is to say to our son that you have an absolute right and a responsibility to explore all 64 colors.
That's good.
I want to respond to this because it really takes me back to looking at how I grew up. The reality is, an understanding of what a man was really something that wasn't really hammered into me. It was something that I saw on a daily basis. My father was not a person that was constantly in your ear telling you what you needed to do, nor was his father. My mother's father, same way, but when I look at those images and examples of what a man was, all of these men worked every single day. And so that was embedded in my mind, the importance of being responsible, the importance of being there. I mean, for me, I never experienced where, my father was never at home, for an evening. I mean, that was part of my reality growing up. And so that's something for me that I believe maybe not directly by what I was saying, but by the way I approached life and the way I approached being an adult. And I hope that that's what my children saw in me on a day-to-day basis. The fact that I was there. The fact that I was totally responsible. Now, the other thing I wanted to say, and I was thinking about what you said, I know my father loved me, but my father, it wasn't until he was in his 90s that he actually said he loved me. And I mean, I'm just saying, but that was something that was important to me to tell my children every single day, I love you. That was important to me. I knew my father loved me, but probably because of generational approaches to life, that's not manly to tell your son that you love them. But I understood by his actions that he loved his children and he was a good man, and that's really what I tried to embed in my children. The importance of, first off, understanding that you're loved, and secondarily, that I'm there, and I will always be there.
I think I would say that for co-parents, it revolves around conflict, because inconsistencies, and say emotional neglect, because there's a lot of times when one parent will talk bad about the other parent, and the child sees that, and with inconsistencies, because when you set expectations and rules, you may be in one parent's house and there's one set of rules, you go to the other parent's house, there's a different set of rules. They're not on the same page. So when co-parents do that, the child wants to be where, say, he gets away more being with that parent. And I think it shapes and affects how they're emotionally, when they start getting older, how they treat their relationships because what they see. Because I always say children are visual. And when they see that, that's how they grow up to be.
Actually, that's a good response, because that leads to the next question. In fact, I think your response was in direct, well, it would have been excellent for this question here. Yeah. How can, I tell you, getting old is something else. You know, how can extended family members support a co-parenting relationship without causing conflict?
Right. And that's good, because I feel the extended family is a key. Because usually the extended family will side with, say, the parent that is part of their family. I think it needs to be more family support with the whole family, you know, and not putting, say, the child in the middle of adult conflict, you know, keeping that private, and focus on the well-being of the child, not of the person that you're related to. So I think that's the key when it comes to the family support.
I'm gonna piggyback on, my wife's family embraced my son, right? But they always extended an invitation to the mother. And the jealousy thing plays a major part also in co-parenting, where this is my son, not your family. But they always extended it to her. It's up to that other person to reciprocate and take it in. If they don't, then that's going to have a nasty taste to the extended family. It's like, you know, we're not going to involve that person anymore because of the way she treated us.
Right.
So it has to work both ways for it to work out. Because everything goes back to the kid. Everything we're doing is to help that child grow. And if that one parent is not on board, then it leaves a nasty taste. And as he gets older, he understands. He sees things, and it's like, oh, this is what she's doing. This is what he's doing. They understand what's going on. Like my son knows what's going on when the other side of the family tries to extend the olive branch to her, and she's not reciprocating to it.
And I think all these questions are very similar, but different. This next question is, how do you co-parent effectively when parenting styles are different? Absolutely.
There is, and so let me preface my comments by saying I speak from failure, not success. Exactly. You have to understand the difference between consensus and alignment. Where we've fallen short as parents in terms of how with different parenting styles. We are in the same house, so you go parent in the same house, right? So we have different parenting styles and approaches that have sometimes been in conflict because of the style. Where we've never had conflict is what we were fundamentally grounded in. Maturity teaches you the difference between consensus, like we have to, why doesn't she see it the way I see it, or why doesn't he see it the way I see it? Leadership alignment is we fundamentally believe in X, Y, and Z. And we may have different approaches to how we deal with X, Y, and Z. But if we are tethered to that thing, or those things, then the road to how we parent more smoothly is paved. It doesn't always mean it's easy to do, but there's an intentional component of understanding the difference between consensus and alignment.
I just want to very briefly, the foundation is the key, which you referenced. I think it's also recognizing the fundamental differences between you and your spouse. What I've learned, generally speaking, and I might be totally wrong, women tend to be stronger and more involved on a day-to-day basis with the child. Even though, as I said earlier, you know, my commitment is to be there, I also recognize my wife is constantly talking to the kids. So, you know, and I actually think that creates a dynamic all its own. That doesn't mean I don't interact with my children. I'm just saying on a day-to-day basis, there's certain things that they're going to go directly to the mother to talk to. They're not going to say anything to me, you know, and so understanding that. But I think the fundamental difference in what makes any type of co-parenting situation one that's valuable is recognizing that you're on the same page, You understand that your kids may attempt to try to play you, but at the end of the day, knowing that your mother and father, we are working in tandem. I mean, we just are. We may approach things differently, but when it comes to fundamental responsibilities, we're constantly on the same page. And I think getting your kids to understand that, which I believe they do and have, is extremely important.
And you know what, I definitely agree with that, because you're right, the children will go to their mother because they talk more. When you think about women and men, women may talk 2,500 words a day, and men like 1,500. You know, you can ask a woman, I asked a man, how was your day? It was fine. I went to work, went to a meeting, came home. You ask a woman, well, I got up late, I got to run in my stocking, I couldn't find a parking space, I left my father at the desk. They will go all through that. So naturally, they will go to the women first. But like you said, you have to have boundaries and guidelines. You have to have the same set of rules in both households, so the child can get an understanding, like, okay, what I do here, I have to do here also. You know, so you have to be on the same page with that. And like you said, women, they're the greatest. Women can work a job, write a book, start a business, take care of the kids, cook the meals, they can do all of that. Us, men, we can't do that. So I applaud women 100%.
You're 100% right. And I agree with you. My wife can turn a 5-minute conversation to a whole hour conversation. So whenever I get back up, I say, this is my Lord right here. So men, we don't talk as much. When we do talk, we have something to say.
Right.
But women, not bashing you guys just built that way to talk.
I think I'll say one last thing, which is, I won't say last, because someone's going to see something else, but to co-parent effectively, even though we have different styles of parenting, different ideas about it, it really comes down to respect. In our Master Emotions session, it was earlier with the boys, there was a couple boys that just kept on talking about respect, respect, respect. And the thing is that kids see, not only do they see, they feel. And sometimes they feel more than they see. And what does that mean? It means is that if we're not respectful to the parents, to the other spouse or mother or father, whatever the case might be, if we're not respectful to the other kids in the household, if we're not respectful to the other families, if we're not showing that respect, they're going to feel it more than they see it and hear it. And then they're going to internalize that, and then later on, that is what they're going to do. They're going to model that behavior, right? They're going to do that. And it's going to lead them to be, and what we see right now, actually, a lot of kids that are emotionally dysregulated because they do not know how to handle those emotions. So we have to respect each other. It's okay that we're different. It's okay that we're not in a relationship anymore. We have to be okay with that, and we have to respect the other person, respect their decision not to be with us. That has to be okay, because now what we're talking about is raising that king. And how do we do that? It's by showing them that it's okay that we made a mistake, but how do we move forward from that mistake?
And let me just say one last thing about that. Sorry.
I'm sorry. The mistake is not the child. I want to make sure I understand. The mistake is that it's a relationship in it, okay?
And like David said, that is the key, because children are visual. So they have, and if the parents aren't together, you have to show respect to that parent so the child can see that, not argue with them all the time. Show them like, look, I respect your mother. Even though we're not together, we both love you. You know, we may not love each other, but we both love you. And you got to show them respect. Speaking calm when you have a conversation. When you're communicating with, you know, say the ex or whatever, you know, the child's mother or whatever, the child's father. Just be calm. Speak with respect to teach them respect so they can be respectful as they get older.
Excellent, excellent. These next couple of questions are very interesting, and I think every one of you will probably want to respond to this. But what unique role does a father or male mentor play in raising a boy to become a leader?
Go. Over. Take it away.
Leadership, from my perspective, is a mindset. Leadership is not something that's created. Leadership is something that is developed, and what I've attempted to do as a father is to show responsibility is one of the most important elements to being successful in whatever you do in your life. And I mentioned earlier, both of my grandfathers, both of these men were deacons in their churches. They were considered leaders in the community, but they were never elected to anything. But it was like the level of respect. When I look in hindsight at both of my grandfathers, I see that. And I saw that as a child. I saw how people approached them in the community. And what I saw was a level of leadership that existed. Because these men were true to form, they were family men, they were also responsible, they worked directly in the community. So my response is leadership is something that is not a given. Every child has the capacity to be a leader, but it's where we as parents can be champions for that child to assist them in recognizing that leadership doesn't mean you gotta be the loudest in the room. Leadership doesn't mean that, you gotta run for office or you have to have certain titles. Leaders are individuals that by their actions, people gravitate towards. And generally speaking, and I don't know many examples of leaders that have not been people that have been totally committed. And I just think that's something that you can't necessarily teach that. But I think certainly for a child, through observation, I believe that is probably where we as men, as black men, can have the most impact on our children, just by our actions. Because I'm gonna tell you, and I think all of you know, young people will let you know if they see that you are coming at them wrong. If they see that you are not being sincere in what you're preaching, they will call you out. But I think they also recognize when they see consistency. And that is really, the most important thing, I believe, to developing that. Just being consistent.
And I'll add a little bit. I'll clap for that because I think he takes everything everybody's gonna say, but I will speak for myself. My boys are by my wife, but my oldest daughter, who's now about to be 35, I was very intentional since 1993 to the present in how I live. And I know she was watching because she pretty much followed everything she saw me doing. She went to school every day. I was the guy growing up that never missed school. Maybe I had an absent, it was something in nature went on, but, and then it carried on to my workforce where I was a guy with use and lose leave every year, all the sick leave, never missed a day. And her now as an adult goes to work every day. She graduated 3 years of college, cum laude, perfect attendance. So I know she was watching, how I operate in my household. And now my oldest son, who's about to be 30, he's now, and anybody that follow my story from reality TV, my oldest son has some challenges in life. And he's currently now working for MedStar. And at work every day, working doubles. And he actually told me, thank you for not giving up on. I was watching and I just want to be a better man. So like you said, anybody's ever, they're absolutely watching and just being intentional at, being a great example.
I think one of the hardest truths for parents to accept is that the lowest level of leadership you have is your title. So as a father to a young man, the lowest level of leadership I have with him, and I've had with him, is the fact that I'm his father. But if I do the what I'm gonna call it Collins C's: character, consistency, communication. You know, if you show those kinds of things and you model those behaviors, that's when you become the leader in the eyes of not just your child, it could be your community, it could be the folks who you work with, have you. So with my son Brandon, with our son Brandon, you know, it has been intentional with respect to how I have shown up as a man to model what being a king looks like. And one of the other things that I would add to that is understanding that the title of king or shepherd, if you would say, we've often looked at it in a way that is actually not healthy. Because if you understand what a shepherd does, what the alpha does in nature, the alpha doesn't stand up, doesn't stand out in front of the pack. The alpha actually leads from behind to make sure that everybody goes where they need to go. And so one of the things that I'm proud of is his level of emotional intelligence around leadership that is probably different from his dad's generation. And that is, like, how do I bring everybody with me and not run in front of everybody?
The reason why I think that the father's role is important in a household for a child is because there's something that I see quite a bit of in my practice, which is role confusion. Role confusion, mixed roles, meaning that the parent's the child, the child's a parent, right? We're friends to our children instead of being a parent to them. So there's a lot of role confusion. So the reason why it's important for a father and a mother to be in those relationships is because they need to see the distinct roles that we're talking about. When we're talking about leadership, if you're not there, you can't lead. They can't see that, right? So that's why it's important for us to make sure that we're understanding that the goal is to raise this child. The goal is not for us to be right. The goal is not for us to make the other person feel bad. The goal is to make sure that the child is raised correctly. And we do that by making sure that we're all in the same role, in the proper roles, Single mothers, they're wonderful, they're great, and I know it's a very hard job. I applaud my son's mother for doing so for such a long time. I didn't leave her out there on her own, though. I made sure that I was around, I made sure that I was there, I made sure that I was taking care of him in every way possible that I could, even though it was difficult. And what he learned is that Mom is here for me, Dad is here for me, I'm in this position. If I'm not in that position, sometimes mothers want to put the boy in that leadership role, and we can't do that. That's role confusion. They don't understand what being a leader is because they haven't been taught it, all right? They don't even know how to follow just yet, so how can we lead? So it's very important that we're all in our roles and that we're doing them appropriately so that way they can raise them in the way that they need to be so then they can be that appropriate king, right? That godly king, that king that can then take their family to that next level.
And that's a good point, and I just want to add to that fathers and mentors play a key role in shaping the boys and young men into leaders. And let's just say this, men aren't exclusive to being a leader. Women can lead also. It's not just men, but young boys and young men look to men to lead. And and that way, when they look to the men to lead, they can stay, like the gentleman down there said, you lead by example. They're watching. They're seeing what you're doing. My son said to me, I appreciate the way you led the family. Because the men are like the leader of family. You look at the family structure with, say, God, Jesus, the man and the woman. The man goes to God to get wisdom, and he takes it to the family, leads the family. And my son saw that. And he said, I appreciate how you led the family. So like you said down there, it's a matter of them watching. They're always watching. They may not say anything, but they're watching to see how you lead, see how you interact, and they model themselves after that. So being a good leader is just being yourself. And they watch that, and they take that example so they can start leading.
I want to speak on leadership also. I have 4 boys at home. Every time I kiss my wife, my son back there goes crazy, right? He runs into her like, oh, they kissing, right? So the emotional piece, I didn't grow up with the emotional piece in the household. So for a long time, I had a hard heart because I didn't know how to express my emotions, right? And it still haunts me today. So me unraveling that, teaching my boys how to be emotional. My therapist asked me, have you boys ever seen you, so going through my grieving period, my mother, have you boys ever seen you cry or grieve? And she's like, once you show them how emotional you can be, that will let them know that daddy also hurts too at times, right? So leadership can be emotional, physical, them mimicking what we do. I can leave the house and my boys can be like, okay, daddy expects us to do X, Y, Z, and mommy doesn't have to tell us. And they already know, well, if daddy's not gonna leave you trash out, I'll just do it, right? Those are the things, the small things that we need them to do and that will help them with organization structure skills when they get older. But me, I'm trying to really bring the emotional piece to my boys to make them understand it's okay to be emotional, to express yourself. Because a mother would want her sons to be in a situation where a woman doesn't allow them to be emotional or express herself, and vice versa. So that's my thing. Leaders also express emotions and let the sons see that it's okay to be emotional. You don't have to be hard all the time. And that's my battle as an adult at 41. And like I said, through therapy, I'm still trying to let my guard down. But if I have the boys around me, they let me be who I am, the person that I was supposed to be emotionally, and I show them love unconditionally at all times. I try to never, if they want to have a conversation, I let them express themselves. And that's my battle as being a leader, is continuing to let emotions express themselves through just through being a parent.
Let me first applaud this man for saying something that we don't talk enough about in our community, specific to our men. Dr. Hudson, I think you said something about emotional dysregulation, right? A lot of the challenges that we have in raising kings comes from the fact that we haven't processed through these things that we have been traumatized by in our lives. So when and I'll share an example. I didn't have a father, and my mother was a substance abuse. And it wasn't until I had therapy that I understood that I resented my wife for being a mother to our children that I didn't have, right? And it took, that's the kind of stuff you unpack in therapy. And I would never have, that's so non sequitur in thinking about that, I would have never logically come to that conclusion. But when I realized that I needed to unpack my childhood, which a lot of men don't do. So how can I then set the example in ways that I haven't necessarily fully ironed out myself? And so I'm a huge advocate of therapy. For all, blanket statement and somewhat judgment, all of us might need to be in therapy. For one reason or another. All these things that we, particularly our men, that we carry with us, that stop us from being the whole human being that we need to be for ourselves first and foremost, so that we can then be who we need to be for those in our lives who we are guiding and leading.
You know what, and that is so good, because I'm with you. I don't even know my father. We grew up with 5 of us, 4 boys and 1 girl, and my mother raised us. So we didn't have a father figure. And there's not a manual on how to be a father or how to be a leader. So like you said, it's you learn it, because I was raised with never saying I'm sorry. So I didn't know how, if my son was hurt, how to say I'm sorry, or give him a hug. Because my mother worked all the time and she didn't hug us and say she loved us. Like you said, it took a while before she said I love you. So like you said, therapy is good and it's tough.
Excellent answer by everyone. I ditto what you all have said. I think just my little 10 cents. I agree with Mr. Carroll. One of the things we as black men, we are socialized to be strong, and that included, and usually a lot of that strong related when you were young to being on the basketball court or football field. You know, you hurt or you injured, you know. You get up, dust yourself off and get back in there. But we carried that back to our lives as we grew up, and we don't talk about stuff. You know, we deal with a lot of things internally, and we'll get through. You know, that's why it takes us, most of us, a long time to get saved, because we think we can do it ourselves. You know, and then it's not till we exhaust everything else and like, well, let me try the Lord and see what he can do. And we realize, man, I should have done this a long time.
You know, that's so true, because I know I never cried when a family member passed. But boy, once I became saved, I think I went to church and cried every single Sunday.
And you realize it's a stronger man
It's a stronger, yes.
than one that'll hold it in. You know, and like I think everyone is up here said in one way or another, you have to be confident enough and free enough to be yourself.
Yep.
And be confident in that. You know, you cry, yeah, I'm crying. I feel bad. You know, but that don't mean I'm a punk. You know, that doesn't mean I'm soft. That just mean I feel bad. You know, so, but excellent answers, gentlemen. If you could give one piece of advice to parents raising boys today, what would it be?
I'll go first. I'm an educator in DC, 5 through 8, and a lot of our boys don't have a male figure in their life. So, put them in a positive environment for them to grow around positive men, or get positive men. Even if they don't have a father, find a mentor. The environment will shape them to become a better person. Even though they don't have a father or a father in the house or a stepfather, if you put them in a positive environment, they will grow and they will mimic the positive men around them. That's all these young boys need, is a positive environment. They see too much on the social media networks, and they tend to go after that, thinking that's the way they should be living. So just a positive environment. That's the only piece of advice I can get as being an educator and seeing how these boys stray away from positivity.
Right. I would say that the one advice I would give them is, it's okay to say I'm sorry. It's okay to say I'm scared. It's okay to say I don't know how to handle this. I need help. Because I think we were raised, well, I was raised where you don't need help. You can do everything on your own. But it's okay to ask for help, you know, because real leaders don't cross the finish line alone. They bring people with them. So when you look at it, asking for help, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you any less tough. It makes you just more resilient. That's the piece of advice I would give them.
I would say a great piece of advice is parents raising boys or raising young men, kings, is be the parent. Don't be the king's friend. You know, and that's the mistake that I see a lot of parents make. You want to be their friend. For me, my sons understand that I'm their father. And I tell them real quick, you know, I'm here to support you. I'm not your friend. I'm your father. And that's our relationship. You know, I'm there for them, do anything for them, but I'm the father first.
A lot to unpack with that question. But before I close this out, I wanted to acknowledge something, because we were talking about like merged families and, you know, co-parenting. You know, my son and daughter, they were raised together, but my wife has an older son, and he provided one of the most beautiful moments in my entire life. When he came up to me and asked if he could call me, if he could refer to me as Pop. You know, I still think about that moment, because him literally coming to me with that. You know, and it made me understand the importance of, how you said the common seeds. I can't remember what they were, but I recognized it was just a matter of just being there. And in the fact that he had dealt with a lot in his young life. And the fact that he asked me, I mean, I'll never forget that as long as I live. You know, I mean, because that was coming from a young man, you know, and it made me feel like, okay, I'm struggling every day trying to be responsible, trying to be a father, trying to be a good husband, all of the things that are associated with the responsibilities that we have. But I think all of us collectively, we can have a part of creating the kings that I think exist in our communities. And my final thought is, it is the environment that we put our children in. I mean, that's the bottom line, because all of our children have the capacity to be kings and queens. Unfortunately, all of our children are not in environments that enhance the opportunities for them to grow and develop to be them. But that's why this panel, what this nonprofit is doing is so important, because it's providing a sense of community, and it's just great to be a part of a panel with Black men. And it's great for us because at the end of the day, we are all doing our best to build our community.
So,
but thank you for
when
letting me be a part of it.
when he asked you that, did it make you cry?
Well, I didn't cry in front of him.
My piece of advice would be coming from the frame of young people, and that is this. In a world that is increasingly tech-driven, and where the digital divide becomes greater every single day, one of the best things that we can do is teach them how to be good human beings.
Yes.
And I'm actually going to piggyback off of that one, because what I was thinking was effective communication. Not just communication, but effective communication. If we're not able to do it ourselves, if we can't teach our children effective communication, then take them to someone that can, all right, and make sure there's truly good, effective communication, and then have your child teach you that effective communication if you don't know how to do it, all right, because we want to make sure that they are doing that correctly. And because of the world they're in right now with social media and being online, they do not communicate very well. Right, and if they're not communicating very well with their peers, that means they're not going to communicate very well with you as well also, right? So, and there's so much that our children are going through that they're struggling with, that they're not able to speak to us about. Sometimes it's barriers that we put in place that prevents them from coming to us, and sometimes it's just the world itself that tells them don't say anything. But regardless of the reason, we want to make sure that we're teaching them how to effectively communicate with us. All right, then they can communicate effectively with the rest of the world. All right, that's how that's it. Thank you.
I know we run out of time, but I will be pretty blunt with you. Let them fall. Don't feel bad. You know you did your best. You raised a great young man. But sometimes you gotta let them fall, bump their head a little bit. Just be there to decide them, but let them bump their head. I'm speaking specifically of my situation, because my 29-year-old about to be 30, he wasn't getting it until as of recent, and that's because we pretty much cut everything. Like, you figure it out, you grown, you figure it out, and he figured it out. Like I said, I'm super proud of him. He has a career. He's actually expressed interest in law enforcement, which nobody saw that coming. I'm sending him stuff about Prince George's County Police and this police, and he's actually doing security now. So, parents, I would just say, don't let them, I'm speaking of the young men, not the babies that's in here, but the young men, you know, it's a village for a reason. That's your village born to them. Because mine wasn't getting it from me. I was too direct, coming from law enforcement, and I was being rejected. It was like, your father, police, or my dad, police, he didn't want to hear it. But yet, you could say the same thing I said, and Oh, yeah, that makes sense. And now that he's like I said, he's getting it, and when we talk now, he's like, damn, I wish I had listened. So don't, take it personal. Let him bump their head a little bit. They'll be okay.
I love that because my daughter's third grade teacher is something that made me upset at first until I understood it. I walked into the classroom and fail was on the wall, and I was just irate. So I'm like, how are you going to tell my child to fail? But I didn't understand. I looked too quickly, but once I looked at it, it said first attempt in learning. First attempt in learning. So we have to fail in order, of course, to learn. And if we're not learning, then we're not succeeding. Right? We're not advancing. We're not growing. So that's the important part. So failure or fail is not a bad word. It's a good word. Matter of fact, I adopted fail. I said, well, I failed, I sailed, I tried everything. I just spent the time, to get to where I'm supposed to be at right now. So don't look at it as a bad thing. So thank you for that for sure. Allow them to falter, allow them to fail. You can't catch them all the time. Just be a safety net for them, but allow them to make those decisions for themselves, those struggles for themselves, because that's what we have to do as well. And once again, thank you all for being here today.
All of these gentlemen, could you please give these gentlemen a round of applause? Excellent answer. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I really appreciate you all taking time out of your schedules to participate in this today. And thank you very much.